Second first professional event of the week is our panel, Dear Doctor, where we're going to talk with 5 different doctors in the fields of physics and related that have things to share with us, the rest of the community, about their journey, about their transition, about what makes a successful doctor, and things like that. Before we get into this, I do want to let everyone know that this is the first of the week. So we will have events the same time every day, Monday through Friday. So please attend if you can. We also have some social events. There's going to be panelists, game nights, cooking. And at the end of the week, we'll culminate with a large job fair, as well as a poster session and a 3-minute thesis competition open to all graduate students. And there are cash prizes, so please make sure that you sign up to participate or to just view. So that being said, welcome everyone. I guess I didn't say my name. My name is Monika Edwards. I am a current 3rd-year graduate student at the University of Florida, working towards my PhD in astronomy. I have been very active in the community, in the physics community, and I really am excited about this opportunity to share physics with the world, with people who have similar backgrounds to me and others, and to share what that's like with everyone. So I'm going to just let, how this session is going to go is I have a couple of questions that I'm going to be asking our doctors, but it's kind of free form. So I would love for each of our doctors to give a brief, short introduction for themselves. And I will start with, trying to get the list. So we have Dr. Abigail Frost, if you could wave and say hello.
All right, hi everyone. Yeah, I'm Dr. Abigail Frost, and I'm a researcher who's originally from the UK, but I now live and work in Belgium as a researcher in astrophysics. My specific research that I do is focused on finding out how the biggest stars in the universe form, in particular couples of stars or binary systems that will eventually become gravitational wave progenitors. And I'm currently in my first postdoc, so I'm about to enter my 3rd year of my first postdoc position here in Belgium. I completed my PhD, which I did in the UK at the University of Leeds in 2019. And before that, I also did my undergraduate degree in the UK as well, in a city called Exeter. So yeah, my first experience living abroad, my first kind of experience as a postdoc, and I know providing kind of that kind of early days perspective as to like a career in physics research. So yeah.
Thank you. And how would you like me to address you?
Abby is fine.
Yeah. Thank you. And next we can go to Dr. Clayton Simeon. Please correct me.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm Clayton Simeon. I'm an associate professor in physics at the University of Alabama in Birmingham. My area of research is atomic, molecular, and optical physics. Interests are in cold plasmas, laser cooling trapping, precision measurements, atomic clocks, and things of that nature. I'm originally from Texas, the Houston area, and I'm here now, and I'm happy to be here.
Sorry, my phone. Should have silenced that.
No problem.
Thank you. Thank you. And how would you like me to address you, sir?
Clayton.
Clayton, perfect. Yeah. Awesome. Next, we can go to Dr. Monika Schleier-Smith. Please correct me if that was.
Yeah, that's perfect. Hi, yeah, I'm Monika Schleier-Smith. I am an associate professor in the physics department at Stanford. And I actually, like Clayton, do experimental atomic physics and broadly interested in quantum science with laser-cooled atoms. And so that ranges from performing quantum-enhanced measurements to using laser-cooled atoms as model systems for simulating phenomena from other areas, ranging from condensed matter to quantum gravity, and ultimately perhaps using these atoms as in quantum computation. Would you like a few words about our career trajectory, or will you shall we?
We'll be getting to that. Yeah,
Okay,
this will be just kind of a quick.
Okay, wonderful, and please call me Monika.
Awesome, thank you. All right, and next we have Dr. Naaza Zimba. Please correct me if I was wrong. And Naaza, I don't see actually. JK, we're gonna skip that. We have Dr. Phillips.
Hello, you can call me Philip. I work at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. My research is in sort of a hybrid area between condensed matter and string theory. I try to import new ideas from high energy into condensed matter. And the reason I do this is that the problems I work on have been, well, the claim is that they can be solved by gravity. So that's what I try to do. And I also use traditional methods that are sort of at the edge of condensed matter. And the key thing is trying to understand strongly correlated systems. And so I guess you could say I work on montness and sort of like string-related problems.
Very cool. Thank you all so much for those introductions. I would like to say here, there is a Q&A option on Zoom. So if you are participating via Zoom, feel free to submit questions and I will try to keep track of those as well. But I do have a couple questions for you all. Thank you for those descriptions about what you do. I am personally involved in astronomy. So I do have a background in physics as well, and engineering and computing. I do way more things with stars and space, so it's very interesting to hear these other kind of like more physicsy sounding things, condensed matter and things like that. So that's pretty cool to me. So my first question that I have for you is, what all can you do with a PhD in physics? Like, what are the options that you had once you walked across that stage, with the big beautiful robe? What are your options once you get a PhD? And anyone can take this.
Well, I think the options are much greater now. I have students who are going into Intel. I don't think that was an option, certainly when I got a PhD. So I think there are industry and academics and non-industry positions. There's also the business world, there's Wall Street. It seems to me that if you have a quantitative background, people like that. So it's not as if a student comes to me and says, I think I'm going to bail on academics, I just throw them out. There are lots of options if you have this quantitative background. So I think that's the one thing that has changed since I was looking for a job.
Absolutely. I think, Clayton, you were going to add something?
Oh no, I agree with everything he says. And, there's lots of options, like, in various industries throughout the United States. Like, one of the industries that I see a lot when I'm looking online is the medical industry. There's a lot in the tech sector, like, was that the reason why I mentioned the medical industry is because it wasn't something that was sort of, kind of presented to me while I was getting my PhD. It was usually, okay, you go to academia or you try to go work for the federal government or something like that, or maybe you get an industry job. It just, sort of depends on what you did, or more technical based job. But, now there's lots of other industry that's sort of open to, people outside of physics. And I think that's also part of the reason for that is because things are more interdisciplinary now. And so you need people from various backgrounds to actually get things done, because we're attempting to try to tackle harder problems that are much harder. So.
Absolutely. And Monika, I think you were going to go next. But before we do, someone had a question that Philip is typing an answer to. But what exactly does industry jobs mean? Can someone give an example of that? And Monika, maybe you can talk to that in addition to your point.
Yeah, I can maybe mention that and some other points that came to mind. So Roughly speaking, when people talk about sort of directions one can go, they usually talk about, let's say, academia, national labs, and industry. And then industry sounds kind of vague. What does that mean? That could mean anything from a startup company that's working on quantum computing. Certainly in my field, people are going into that, to a more established place like Google. Here in the Bay Area, we have lots of large tech companies. And broadly speaking, there are lots of places where the sort of main skill set that's needed is problem-solving skills, right? And a PhD is so much about learning to problem solve, right? You're presented with an open-ended question. You're not often given, actually, as an undergraduate, but in graduate school, right, you're really given an open-ended question that nobody knows the answer to, or maybe you even need to identify what the question is. And you're really spending every day, certainly in my lab, a lot of the time is spent figuring out why the thing that we didn't work the way we thought it would, right? And then once you solve that problem, you move on to the next one. And so, problem solving is needed just in so many areas, so that, I know people who have taken the problem solving skills they got in their physics PhD and applied those to problems of, clean energy, even if in graduate school they were working on something totally different. So the other thing I maybe just wanted to briefly comment on is even within academia, even there are different types of jobs, right? So if you want to stay in physics and stay in academia, there are questions of, would you want to be more teaching focused? Would you want to be more research focused? All different kinds of institutions. And so even those jobs can look very different. And so if that's something that you're thinking about, kind of talking to people at different types of institutions and finding out what their day-to-day is really like could be really valuable.
Thank you. And Miss Abby.
So just adding on to the kind of, at least from the Astro perspective, a lot of people that I know, the different fields that they've gone into. Another thing that's really popular is, at least in Astro, we have to do a huge amount of coding in order to handle the data that we work with and also to model it. And these are extremely transferable skills as well. I know a number of people who've gone into coding-based professions, whether that be cybersecurity or whether that be video game development based in languages like C++ or Java, for example. And again, all of the skills that you learn during your PhD, just to emphasize Monika's point, they really are applicable to a huge number of fields. And when people see that you're technically minded and a critical thinker and are able to, apply that to a specific task, that's really valued by a lot of employers now. And yeah, I think it's a good base for lots of different careers if you decide you do want to move away from physics. And also to highlight again the kind of choices within physics from the Astro point of view as well, is that you have more kind of staff astronomer roles. So if you want to work full time in an observatory, that is one option. But also again, there are often in Astro lots of outreach and research jobs, which I think is also a nice option if you enjoy, the education aspect, but for more of the primary school or the kind of the younger children as well, and also it's just another option that's out there as well. So.
Thank you. I'd like to actually introduce our newest guest, Dr. Naaza Zimba. And please correct me if I said that wrong.
No, that was perfect. Thank you.
Perfect. Awesome. So we had everyone else give just like a 2-minute introduction about themselves and who they are, what they do. And then we were in the middle of a question of what exactly can you do with a PhD in physics? And I think you might be a good person to talk about this as well, because an attendee had a question of what does an industry job mean? And you might be able to speak to that. So could you please give us a brief introduction for yourself?
Oh, yeah. So my name is Naaza Zimba. So I'm currently working as a data analyst. And so at the moment, my background was I did physics in uni and then kind of went on to graduate school and then kind of completed that. And then afterwards, I felt almost like I wanted to be in the professional world almost and bring those skills to the professional world and actually bring the whole scientific process into my work. I know usually obviously a lot of PhDs like to go into sort of research and then continue in academia, but I feel like there's a lot of skills that you can actually transfer into once again the professional world. So currently I'm a data analyst in a digital marketing firm, and I feel like at the moment the way I tackle problems, especially at work, is a question gets posed, and then once that question gets posed, I can then hypothesize that question, and then so then an experiment gets done, and then at the end I analyze that data, I find my findings, and then I sort of communicate that to to people who may not necessarily know too much about wherever I'm like trying to like get behind, if you know what I mean. And so that's the entire sort of scientific process in workings. And it's kind of great to actually be able to communicate to maybe, for example, my boss who may not, or like sort of my director who may not actually know exactly what the question I'm tackling is, and actually being able to then pose that in a really like kind of analytical way is kind of perfect.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Does anybody else have any additional comments or questions before I go on to the next question? Silence. Love it. Awesome. So thank you for that. I think that was really interesting. There's a lot of different options for a PhD in physics. You can go, as everyone here has said, into industry, into academia. It seems like the world of opportunities opens to you. So then I guess the next question that I would have is, how did you pick? What led you to choose your current position over all of those other possible paths, right? Why industry? Why your career? And anything is, we want the real answers. We don't want the, well, because, we want the truth. So who'd like to go first? All right. Oh, perfect. Awesome.
Go ahead, Monika.
Yeah.
Go
So,
ahead, Monika.
I think I always had this general idea that I might want to go into academia. My mother had done a PhD, totally different field in linguistics, but at least there was sort of like, some precedent for somebody doing a PhD and going into teaching. I didn't really, when I was in college, I thought, that's something I might want to do. At least I'll go do the PhD. I'll see where it leads. But I also had no idea, even if I were to stay in academia, what that would mean or what I want to be, focused on. I imagined maybe I would want to teach at a small college. I ended up at, a large research institute, at a research institution. So I think for me, kind of over the course of graduate school, the main thing is that I was kind of having fun doing what I was doing, and I still wasn't sure exactly where it would lead, but I kind of thought I want to do more of this. So I was enjoying the research. I, was hearing talks about exciting other research groups doing that I thought, oh, maybe I could go there for a postdoc. And so I kind of just kept thinking, what's the thing I'm most excited to do next, right? And so as I was nearing the end of my PhD, I was excited to do a postdoc. And as I, started doing my postdoc, I did a little bit more of things like going to conferences and also kind of mentoring the graduate students in the lab, kind of managing a small research team. And I could start to see like aspects of the job, even things like refereeing papers. I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. Like aspects of these different aspects besides just the hands-on things in the lab that I enjoyed. And I sort of thought, okay, I could imagine like continuing to go on in research and in academia. I also at some point in graduate school actually heard a career panel a little bit like this, where a number of young faculty talked about their experiences. And that was the first time I noticed the differences between being, let's say, at a small liberal arts college where you're really teaching more than one course at a time and sort of doing research projects with undergraduates, versus a place like Stanford, where I am, where I have these sort of amazing graduate students who are driving forward the research, and I'm teaching one class at a time, and the balance of sort of teaching and research is perhaps a more even split. So I ended up realizing I really love, I love to teach, but I also love the research, and I like that balance that I have in my current job. And it was really a matter of sort of, I think, one thing leading to the next. I like what I'm doing. Where can I go do more of this or expand a bit? And that's how I wound up here. So, yeah.
I think Clayton was.
Okay. Yeah. So you said tell the truth, right? Yep. So for me, I went into academia because of environment and autonomy, and lifestyle. And so I'll tell you that. So it was an environment. It was initially, but environment I can kind of slash that off the list. It was basically autonomy and lifestyle. I basically how can I like the lifestyle of a faculty member. Your time is kind of your time, but you still work a lot, and so you kind of set your own your schedule and what you're going to do, the work that you have to do, and when you do it, and where you do it, and things like of that nature. So I like that flexibility. Of course, I was married and having children, so that sort of made sense. And autonomy came earlier because essentially I just I've had a lot of interactions in academia and a lot of interactions in my career. And some of those interactions were sort of negative, like interactions. I've had some good interactions, some negative interactions, and some kind of in between. And so when I say autonomy is that basically I figured, boy, if I got tenured, then I don't really have to put up with, other people's, negativity so much, even though you still do. But it's like nobody has that control over me that says, you're out of here. I don't like you. I want you gone. Hey, I could feel, I've always been a person who feels freely to speak my own mind and say what I have to say and do what I think is right. And so if I stand up for what I believe and do what's right, I don't have to feel like I'm under, like, oh, I have to be a part of this group think. I didn't feel like I had to be a part of all these different types of, I could be my own person. And so I was searching. I said, hey, if I could just get through this whole tenure and promotion process, which was another story in itself, and I got this autonomy, then hey, that's how I wanted to sort of live my life. And so that's why I did it. And so yes, the work I love. Oh yes, I like physics. I like solving problems. All that is true. I've done all of those things, but when it really came down to it, is what I wanted to do for my life with a physics degree, and that's why I chose to go into academia for those reasons. So more personal.
Great, thank you. I will ask Abby next.
Yeah, so I think I kind of decided that I wanted to study like space when I was a teenager. I was kind of around 13 where I kind of had a shift in, wanting to be an astronaut, wanting to be an astrophysicist, because I was like, okay, I want to understand the inner workings of these things. I want to understand what makes space tick, sort of, if you like. And I think that persisted, as I got older and it came for me to apply to go to college and all of this. And so, that led me to pursue physics, because then I still found generally science interesting, and I found other areas of physics very interesting as well, but it still left me that option to, continue, because in the UK it's much more structured. You just pick a single subject from the get-go. You don't have a major and then you kind of specify. So that's what I did. And then at the end of my master's, because again in the UK I did an integrated master's, so it's just in 4 years, and it was really when I started to do active research and have a significant project that I realized that I really liked this kind of approach to learning compared to kind of the exam focused studying. And it was really kind of investigating and forming my own ideas, and so I really, really enjoyed that. And I was like, okay, well, I enjoy this way of thinking, and so the kind of natural step for me from doing that research project was to apply for the next kind of big one, which is a PhD. And then I kept going through that, and as Clayton said, I came upon some barriers there. I wasn't expecting some of the negativity that I got when I was doing my PhD, but it was still, I know that my love for research and my love for the kind of work that I was doing still stayed true. And so I decided to, again, kind of, I could continue with my PhD. And when I got a postdoc, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to see how this goes, and then we'll see, how I feel about academia throughout this job. And since I've been doing that, I've really enjoyed it. I think the freedom, as Clayton also said, was just, I really love that. I love that I can, as long as I get my work done, I could do it when I want to. And I think that's really helpful, especially these past couple of years. It's been very helpful for me. And I enjoy the kind of opportunities that I have. There's opportunities to meet lots of different people, even though it's been mostly virtual. And it's the opportunity to travel, at least during my PhD. And I just kind of like I get to do something that I enjoy, that I feel like challenges me in like a satisfying way, but also it's just something that I'm genuinely interested in. I genuinely want to work out what's going on. So it's just kind of personal satisfaction, but also it suits my lifestyle and how I want to work very well. So kind of those two things combined are why I'm still here in academia and still liking it. So yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right. And Naaza.
Yeah, so I wanted to speak about like sort of the autonomy and the freedom, actually, to be fair, because I feel like, yeah, within academia you do get a lot of freedom and there's quite a bit of autonomy, but then I feel like almost maybe my goal, especially going into the professional world, is to gain a different type of freedom almost, and it's potentially to gain that experience, one, to start my own business, probably later down the line, which I'm sure will happen, as well as I also became disillusioned by how slow academia is. In my projects, for example, would last maybe like 2 to 3 months as opposed to like 2 to 3 years, and I kind of like that, almost getting that instant satisfaction for like you would get results just like that and then be able to communicate those results, and then from those results you would instantly be able to get, I don't know, sort of an output, mostly monetary, if you know what I mean.
That's great. Sounds awesome. And Philip.
Yeah, I guess mine is somewhat similar to Monica's. I went to a small four-year college, and my idea was, oh, maybe I'll end up teaching at a small four-year college, and I had no idea how one would end up being a professor at a major institution. And so when I went to grad school, I didn't even have a clear idea what grad school was about. So it was really an awakening process. And every step along the way, it was a deepened appreciation for what you would be doing if you were to pursue this. And it's something that engaged me. And as long as it engaged me, it became clear that's what I wanted to do. So it wasn't a concerted plan that I had at the very beginning. It was really an awakening.
Absolutely.
Can I add actually one more thing that I thought of when others were talking?
Please go ahead.
So I think one of the things that Clayton mentioned autonomy, just not having a boss is a wonderful thing, both in academia and in entrepreneurship. But I think another aspect that's related to that is in academia, you have to kind of actually love being the one who gets to set the vision. And it's actually a big responsibility too, right? Nobody tells you what to do. And I know some people who, like, if they're given a well-defined task, they're going to do it better than you could possibly imagine, but they really like to be sort of assigned that task. And in academia, you have to sort of love nobody telling you, you get to decide what is the problem, right? And then you have to convince people to fund it and get students excited about working towards that vision. And so that can be really satisfying. It can also be daunting, but you have to sort of relish that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of leadership in academia, it sounds like. Leadership responsibilities. So the next question.
Can I say something? I think probably more than leadership is being able to is liking the unknown. Because there's no script here. There's no transcript that we're following, and you have to be comfortable with things being ill-defined. And
kind of like space exploration, the final frontier. You're always on the edge, and so you kind of you never know what you're gonna get.
That seems more well-defined, because you know exactly what you're looking for. To some extent, we do not. I mean, we have some ideas, and we hope things work out. So maybe it's similar. I don't know. It's this. I mean, what you find engaging, at least I do, is the fact that in a year I might be doing something completely different. I know this is. I mean, that's Naaza wants something new in every 2 months. Okay, so look, I've been trying to solve the same problem for 25 years. Okay, so I mean that.
Nuts a little bit, to be fair.
That sort of focus, I mean, it's fine for me. That's fine because no one solved it, and so it keeps me going. It would drive you crazy, but that's fine. That's why we're all different.
It's interesting. It is interesting to see what happens.
What did you say, Naaza? I didn't hear what you said, Naaza.
That it's interesting to see. it's interesting to have that focus for sure. But then that was it. Sorry, go on.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Awesome. So now that we've learned like what you can do in physics, how you guys all kind of figured out your, we have a question in the chat. Can we get more insight on the process of getting funding in academia or a national laboratory setting?
Yeah, so I know more about academia, so I'll start with that. So essentially, if in general, you'll be given some amount of startup funding to get going when you're given a faculty position, and hopefully the institution that hires you with the goal that you will succeed. And certainly in hiring an experimentalist, they're committing to renovate a lab. They really actually they're investing resources in you, and that's the sort of starting point. But of course, pretty soon you need to start bringing in funding from, let's say, the National Science Foundation, perhaps defense agencies, to keep that research program going, and to build it up. And so, in general, the sort of first thing one might look towards, there are specific grants that are intended for early career faculty. So those would be things like some young investigator grants from defense agencies. The National Science Foundation and Department of Energy have early career awards. So that's sort of one thing that kind of one can look towards at the beginning. The other thing, though, that I actually didn't learn right away was that as an early career person, I wasn't limited to applying to these early career awards, that it's actually possible to call up a program manager and talk to them, find out what they're interested in, and send them a proposal. And this was actually, learning this was really actually very important for me. So in my field, there's a fair amount of funding coming from the various Department of Defense agencies. And they're actually structured quite differently from the National Science Foundation, for example. The National Science Foundation is quite bureaucratic. Once a year, there's a deadline, things get looked at by panels and so forth. These defense agencies, there's often sort of one so-called program manager in a particular area, like atomic physics, and that person has some kind of a vision of actually where they think they see the field going, and then they're also looking for input on where the field should be going. And one can really have a conversation with these people and see where, like, my interests and their interests are aligned, and that turns out to be really, if they're sort of excited about the vision, they actually have quite a lot of autonomy in terms of how they distribute funding. So that was something really helpful for me to learn. The other thing that can be really impactful, actually, in the early years, I would say, of starting a group is graduate students can cost a lot of money. And so if graduate students have fellowships, that can actually make a big difference. And sometimes students will come in who are really fantastic, but nobody told them to apply for a fellowship. And so just working with a first-year student and getting them immediately engaged in research and helping them write their NSF proposal can be another great way to basically get 3 years of funding for a graduate student. And then maybe last, there was a question about national labs. So if you're a faculty or scientific staff member at a national lab, there are, for example, here at I'm near SLAC, so the Department of Energy has funding programs that those people can apply for. And some national labs actually give a funding stream. So NIST, for example, there's a funding stream that one would have as a scientist at NIST. Maybe other people can speak more to that, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I was at NIST.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I did a postdoc at NIST. I saw here somewhere in the, that's your job, Monika. Do you worry about getting funded based on ethnicity?
Yeah, I wanted to ask that. So if you'd like to talk about that.
Yes, yeah. I do. I mean, consider the evidence. There's not too many people that look like me that are in my profession.
So let me rephrase the question for those who might not have seen it. The question was, speaking of leadership, what has been your experience with writing grants and proposals? Do you worry about getting funded based on ethnicity? So, continue.
Oh, okay. So I guess I'll finish what I was saying. It's like, speaking of leadership, what is your experiences with writing grants and proposals? I wrote several proposals and probably got maybe 10% of them accepted, which is probably normal. So I did probably okay. Do you worry about getting funded based on ethnicity? Yes, I do, because I look at data. I consider the evidence around me. There's not lots of people who look like me that I see that are funded. Although there are, there's not. So yes, it is something. If you just consider the evidence, that's something that I do take into consideration. That's always in the back of my mind, among many other things, because of my ethnicity. And yeah, grants and proposals. Yeah, that's basically my answer.
Absolutely. Would anyone else like to talk about that point, or what we were kind of talking about before? Just insight on just generally getting funding for the process, or how that affects, or how that's affected based on ethnicity and other factors. Abby, ideas about that?
Yeah, so again, from just maybe if I can provide like the European perspective in case anyone fancies traveling abroad or is already there. I think, yeah, there's also there's often a number of programs that are available, particularly aimed at early career researchers. Again, there's a number of funding bodies that are kind of country specific in Europe. So, for instance, you have the FWO in Belgium, which basically provides you with funding for a PhD or a postdoc position for about 3 or 4 years. And basically, no matter which country you look at, there is usually some kind of national pot of money that you can go for. And there's also there are also kind of more international organizations as well, such as observatories or space agencies like ESA, which again provide this kind of funding, particularly usually with an aim towards early career researchers. It's very common here that you can apply for a lot of these grants, but only if you have finished your PhD within 5 years since your application date. So that's one thing to bear in mind. With regards to the ethnicity comment, I also definitely worry about it. I think this stems back to when I was even just applying for like PhD positions. You know, I was applying for jobs at the same time as my housemates. My housemates are putting their photos on their CVs, being like, "Oh yeah, it helps you stand out," and I'm like, "Yeah, but I mean," and I've always had this kind of like worry about it. And even though, I mean, I don't know why, because I mean, like if they're putting their face on their CV, shouldn't I be like keen to do that? But I mean, I always worry that, you know, someone will have this implicit bias, and I'm like, well, do I want to work with that sort of person anyway? And that's like the other question that comes up. But it's just, yeah, it's always a bit of a conundrum for me. And also another thing that kind of factors in is like, you know, when I'm going through the interview process, you know, I do a lot of kind of outreach work, particularly with Black women and girls. So do I wear that as a badge of honor, or like will they see me as preachy? It's another thing that often comes into my head as well. And I feel like the worry is there, but I feel like, you know, your research and the efforts that you make will speak for themselves. Like an excellent candidate is an excellent candidate. You shouldn't feel you need to diminish any part of yourself. And I feel like, especially if it's a specific institution and you have this worry, I would just be proud of what you have to be proud of, and don't be concerned about it. And then, you know, if they have whatever implicit bias, then I think it will show more on them than it will on you, hopefully. And I feel like we're now in this, at least in a position now where we can try and challenge this a bit more. So I'm trying to be optimistic about this at the moment. Of course, it's easy for me to say because, you know, I am fairly young, I don't have a family, and I'm dependent. So it's more easy for me to like say that. But I'm just, that's just my current opinion. So yeah, the worry is there, but I mean,
you have to face it.
Yeah, you have to face it, exactly.
You have to face it.
Philip, do you have additional comments?
This is all very interesting. So I like Abigail's point. Abby, right? Or Abigail?
Either is fine.
Okay. Don't diminish any part of you. That's good. For me, funding is sort of figuring out the pulse of a field. So you might have come in with certain ideas, but you know, we all know once we, you know, get into a research environment, what's going to fly, and it takes immense adaptability. I mean, I was not trained in string theory, but clearly that was one of the ways the field was going. So, so you adapt. So I think adaptability is something that's essential, but adaptability also calls for immense confidence that you can go and make these changes. And there's a lot that might be going on in your head that that might not be conducive to that. So I think there are pressures, both internal and external, but I think in the end, it's adaptability. The problems are always changing. At least they are in condensed matter. Maybe they are not changing so drastically in other fields, but my impression is that if you're doing research, what's hot is always illusory.
Yeah, actually, maybe just to add to that, I think part of our job, when we're applying for funding, proposing something that should be funded, is to establish what the problems are, right? And not even necessarily just run after the thing that other people think is hot. And this is maybe getting a little bit to a question I saw in the chat about sort of how do you set yourself apart, right? Being able to kind of like set a vision and ask like what questions should we be asking, right? Is I would say a big part of our job.
Now, I am not sure, Naaza, if you do grant proposals in your field. Is that something that you have to worry about?
So like we do sort of client pitch meetings, and in those client pitch meetings, for example, they will then choose the status of level that they would like to like work with your company. So obviously, like you can do like a silver or gold, like to give it like a ranking in terms of like how they would like you to sort of like come into their company, literally strip down exactly what's going on in their company and actually, give them all those like sort of analytics or visuals and what have you that they would like. So obviously, myself anyway, sitting there, like I'm like maybe, for example, one of the only couple like black people in my company anyway. So maybe I do worry when I do sit in front of another client who may judge me for who I am, but as Abigail said, you can't really necessarily, I guess, worry about that. You just need to go do it. And actually, if they actually feel like they don't want to work with you because of that, then I'm sure one, it's their loss, and two, it's not really something you can ever necessarily worry about because you are who you are. That's not going to change.
Absolutely, that was great. I think I got to everyone on that question. So just kind of talking about funding and how our ethnicity or background can affect that. But a follow-up question to that was from a guest. Wanted to ask Clayton. You touched upon 10% acceptance rate with grant proposals. How do you manage the burnout related to and the potential internalization of those rejections? Right, so 10% acceptance means 90% rejection. How do you deal with that? I cannot hear you. I believe you're muted, sir.
Then I'll start off with internalization. First thing you have to recognize that it's nothing wrong with you, and don't think it's, oh, you're not good enough, or there's something missing, something lacking, something, you go through all of these things. And you have to realize that's it. And then you have to also try to, then become a little bit logical and rational and say, okay, what is the process? And so, for instance, if you think about most of the processes, like Monika kind of touched on, it's like, oh, you have a panel, a bunch of people in the room, and they're basically these people who are subjective as well, and they're also objective, but they're sort of deciding and, kind of giving ratings to what you're doing and stuff like that. So that's the sort of the internalized and the sort of the rational part of it, because it's a process that I have no control over. And then so, okay, now I realize that then the next thing is like, you just have, if I decided that this is what my career path was going to be, this is part of the job. So I just have to move forward, and I just have to do that. And so me, I've been told a lot worse of things growing up than no. I've been rejected a lot of times. And so for me, it's like, okay, no, okay, what did you say that I need to change? I'll change it up. I'll move. And I'll keep going. That touches on the adaptability that Phillips said. Okay, I'll adapt it. I'll change it, or maybe I'll switch directions. But you just have to just sort of keep moving through. And and I guess, but how do you think? And then I guess they talk about the burnout is like, you get, they only come in certain cycles. So you apply then, and then you get some time to sort of rest and recuperate, and then you apply again. And then one thing I also like to touch, that's why you kind of prevent the burnout. It's kind of like, it's kind of almost like a boxing match, so to speak. A boxing match, but it seems like the breaks are longer than the rounds. So in a boxing match, you box and you go in a corner and you sort of sit back, you take a break, okay, breathe, and you go back and you go at it again. I'm not saying that it's an ugly process like that, but I'm just saying it is a process that's sort of like that, and it's a long-term process. So yeah, I take my breaks and recoup and then go back and write again. But just do not think it has anything to do with in terms of you as a person and your abilities and your just don't let it knock out your confidence. Just make you feel like you're unconfident. Stuff like that, especially, and also don't make unhealthy comparisons too with others too, because it's just sometimes it just comes down to like I said, the luck. It could be the luck of the draw. It's a lot. It's a mixture of. It's kind of like a mixture of a lot of things. It's luck. It's your skill at writing. It's just things like it's a mixture of a whole lot of things. But just don't blame yourself. That's all I can say.
I have a question. I guess my question is like, what is the demand, right? So if NSF has a tub of money and they have 1,000 scientists requesting money from this tub, can they do they have the ability to accept all of them, or is there some kind of like filter?
No, there's a filter.
Yeah, there's
a filter all the way from.
Somebody talk to that, because I actually just don't know.
There's multiple stages. There's multiple stages in the process to get there, and so once there's one stage. That's the first stage, which I don't know too much about. Maybe Monika or Phillips can talk more about that. And then I know there's a panel phase when it makes it to the panel phase, and that's the sort of, because I've been on panels. That's the kind of phase that I sort of know about, and that's a process in itself. That's it's a sort of a unique process because you're dealing with people, and then beyond that, there's another phase where it has to, the program managers and then the directors and all that other stuff that has to go through there. Usually, if it gets past the panel, it has a good chance of being funded or something like that if the money's available. But yes, there's not enough money to fund everyone, so there's definitely a filtering process, and then a lot of times your job, some universities, well, I shouldn't say that. Go ahead, Monika.
Sorry, I was just going to add to that. There's not nearly enough money. Like I've also been on these NSF panels, and it's like it's really hard. You have good proposals. You have people who have a long-standing, productive research program, and it's running on one NSF grant. And if it's not renewed, you can basically see that research program is going to end. And yet there's sort of not enough funding to go around. So it's very difficult, right? And then you're balancing that against some young person who's trying to get started. So just to say that I think most people, the first NSF grant or the first couple of tries don't make it through, and it's not you if that happens. So
yeah, don't take it personally.
On this, you have to have something that sets you apart, and there has to be a big idea, and small idea proposals don't get funded. So one should not take the inherent odds of getting a proposal funded as a reason to be conservative. You should probably take it as a reason to be more risky.
It's like go big or go home.
Absolutely.
If you have the capabilities to go big or go home at the institution that you're at, there's a lot of caveats. Okay. There's a lot of caveats to the.
There are a lot of caveats there.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm a theorist, so
Yes.
I don't really need all the capital stuff, but I've sat on some committees, and so it's in the end, it was the person who was really pushing it.
Yeah, so you need to get somebody at least really excited about it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're on one of these panels, you really see the consensus forming over the big idea proposals. And, the other ones, it's fine, but it's not gonna, it's very Darwinian. So.
One other thing I want to add about this, though, because maybe we've made it sound very intimidating, like, it's not just, you don't just get a no if your proposal isn't funded, right? You get a lot of feedback. And I've had the situation where, my first proposal to NSF wasn't funded. And then I read the feedback and it was like actually overwhelmingly positive. And I was like, oh, great. Okay. And then there were like some, I think probably the reviewers knew I had some startup funding and didn't urgently need more money yet. But then there was also the constructive comments, right? Where you learn, okay, so actually I just need to tweak this and address that the next time I, when I resubmit something in a year and explain why, no, this isn't the same as this other thing, or why this is going to work when that other thing didn't, and right? So just the feedback can be really helpful. And sometimes, again, one can even talk to the program manager and kind of learn some things from them that are helpful for resubmitting. So.
Would you suggest then that an approach for like applying for funding is to try again, right? Just kind of don't give up.
You shouldn't give up. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, don't go in saying, oh, I'll just do like a draft this time. And like, you should really try, like do the very best you can, and hopefully you'll get it. But if you don't, you'll probably get some useful feedback, and then you'll know what to do next time, right? So, yeah.
Almost like a feedback loop.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like you're basically hedging your bets, but in the end, you have no control. So it's a chance you'll be.
And I think this is also why it's great that there are different agencies that work in different ways and have different interests, and you'll find your fit for funding.
Yeah, Monica's right about this, that they do give you very good feedback. Like in addition to my NSF and condensed matter, I'm trying to get one in string theory, and that's a big ask, because it's always a good idea to solidify your position in the field that you sort of have standing, and then if you want to go branch out, you can go and do that. But it's like starting over again.
Cool. Well, thank you all for this discussion. I think I kind of want to switch it up a little bit, because some of the next questions I have are a little more focused on graduate school. So I'm going to ask you all to take it back a few years. Go back in your mind, reflect, okay? And we've got a couple questions for you. So
before you go on to that, there's a question here from Garrett Williams. As a Black physicist, what was your experience with getting a job as a university professor when it seems to be a saturating position?
Yeah, absolutely. I do agree with that. Let's go ahead and do that question first, and you can start, Philip.
Okay, so I would say that the thing that you need to get regardless of what you look like, your application has to stand out. The ideas you have that you are proposing have to be something that engages people. People at the front of their field. And if that's what so playing it safe, I mean, I've never found success in playing it safe. And I feel as though I don't have the personality for that, for one. And I think to some extent that is defined by my background. I don't think it's an option for me to be a conservative physicist. I think you understand what I mean by that. So I feel as though I have to be on the edge, and I'm also, I know personal from a personality point of view, I'm comfortable being on the edge. Now, there are many who see that and say, well, I could never do that. So, it's just not an option. So you have to know where it is that what mountain you're attempting to climb, and you have to accept the challenge. You have to face up to the challenge. And if you're willing to do that, then it goes back to something Abby said, don't diminish any part of you. So you have to know what these constituents are and how you can harness them to bring out the best. And people are looking for, departments are always looking for people to make them better. That's just the bottom line. And so, if you're in grad school, you're already working on the things that matter, that certain people have sort of like agreed upon, that these are, the problems that make a field. And as you do that, you are seeing, well, how do fields really develop? How do they change? How do you position yourself to see the next breakthrough? And if that's what you're trying to do, you will be relevant.
Do you feel that being Black has affected the process in any way of applying for university professorships?
Well, I think race either helps you or hurts you. It's never neutral. So it's unclear. And I guess that's the problem. You never know which way it's going.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to see the big picture from the inside, almost.
Right.
I was going to add to that. You never know, and it's going to depend on the person, right? There are lots of people involved in making these decisions. It's probably going to depend on the person, and it's more or less outside your control, right? So, so from my perspective, it's sort of not that constructive to think about. I know other people might have different opinions about this, but so from my perspective, it's sort of because ultimately that's sort of like having some new and different vision, right, is what's going to set you apart. And the rest of it is sort of, it's going to vary from person to person how you're
Personally, like I do what consider the situation, what Monika said, what Philip said, all those things are true. So I compartmentalize. Yes, you have to do your due diligence. You have to try to set yourself apart. And like Monika said, you have to think about the physics and how you want to present yourself. But then there's also the aspect. And me, again, I like to consider the data. I look at the data and I look around in that part, and I'm just like,
right.
It's there. There's the evidence. It's there. And I know from my interactions in the communities, National Society of Hispanic Physics, Black physicists, and things like that. I know that there are physicists out there, and I know there have been physicists out there. So why are they not in academia? You read the articles, you do the studies. I've seen the numbers, stuff like that. It is an issue. So the question is that, are you going to let that stop you? Hinder you or hold you back from you going after what you want to do and how you want to live your life. That's what it really comes down to. Like, hey, I decided I want to live my life this way. I decided I want to go in academia. What am I going? I know I've done my due diligence. I'm thinking about the physics and the ideas, and of course, like I said, compartmentalized. There's also this race factor, which I have, as Monika said, I have no control over, but it's still there. So then I have to go into a situation, and I have to sort of, that's just something that I have to consider. That's just with me. It's just how it is. Me and my wife like to joke, hey, that's just another Tuesday. It's just another Tuesday, because that's just how it is. And so you just sort of, go forward with it, because what else are you gonna do? Not do it, and that's just it. And I've applied to multiple places. I've been rejected at multiple places, and I've gotten a few hits. I believe I've been rejected at some places based on the fact, well, I know for a fact, based on the fact of race, I believe that I've been accepted at places because, like you said, that maybe they want to sort of increase the diversity or for some reason like that. But, that's them. But also at the same time, I had to have a good research plan. I had to have a good idea. I had to, at that particular time, convey the physics that I want to do, the long-term plan, like the hope, like the long-term plan, which I kind of, break down into analogy of a baseball game, your base hit versus your home runs that you have towards the end and all those things like that. But for me, it's more about compartmentalization, but don't be, I'm not naive. I was never naive to the fact, just who I am and growing up, that's not a factor and that's not an issue. Because look at the evidence. And it's not your fault if you don't get a job or not, because those jobs are competitive too. So don't take it personal. Don't think you're not enough. Don't think don't think that, oh, I'm not good enough. I didn't do something that maybe this person did or something like that. That's just how it goes sometimes. And life goes on. That's how I live my life. And that's how I think I think that was a healthy view that I had to develop for myself.
Yeah. Naaza, I wonder if we could add to that with regard to, industry jobs. What was your experience getting a job as a Black physicist? Did that affect you? And was your position, is it a saturated position? Is it highly competitive or not?
Well, there's tons of data analysts and there's tons of data analysts anywhere in most industries. So I don't think it's like a necessarily saturated position, but it was definitely, I don't know whether I'd say whether I had whether it took me the longest amount of time or the shortest amount of time to get my job at the moment. As you say, there's always gonna be a certain factor weighted against you based on your race, and whether that's good or bad, it's up to you to kind of decide whether you get for example, that imposter syndrome, and actually does that make you work less or does it make you work more at the end of the day? Does that maybe drive you to then work a little bit harder, but then maybe there needs to be a healthy level of accepting that fact, because once you don't accept that fact, you kind of almost get in your own mind, and you start developing unhealthy habits, I guess. So you just need to, I think, wherever that negative aspect of getting that job because of your race, you just need to kind of use that to kind of boost yourself and work harder, I guess.
Right. You can easily get distracted. So I think that probably speaks to the question, as a Black physicist, what's the experience? So you have to quiet the noise. And, we all have different mechanisms of doing that.
And there's some types of noise that you have to handle up on too. I can tell you that from experience too.
Absolutely.
You have to turn it down yourself. It's not going to go anywhere. And noise that that's hindering your ability to hear or do your work. So I've had to deal with that type of noise, like you said. But it can turn into these patterns. If you focus on it a lot, it can turn into these patterns and these pathologies that become very destructive, like Phillip and Naaza said. And so you have to, like I said,
just find whatever alleviates it for yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
And Abby, I don't know if you had anything to add or not to this. What was your experience with getting a job, and did being Black affect it? Being that university professorships is a saturated position.
Yeah, I think the main thing for me is that I think because I've got a name which it's a very English name. I mean, my last name is my dad's name, and my dad is white English, so I don't know, there's not a huge amount of obvious declaration of my race until I get to the interview stage. And it's always interesting for me at the interview stage when people are like, "Oh, we didn't think you would like this," and I'm just like, "Okay, cool, but I'm already here now, so you're gonna have to interview me." So yeah, I think I worry about it, but I do, that is, I only get confronted with it at a later stage, so I feel like that's the kind of privilege that I have, which I guess is that it just changed a few things. and just because of the nature of the application process here as well, like, you know, you don't, because I don't put my photo on my CV, for example, like it's just a different dynamic, right? So I think I do, again, I do worry about it, and I do kind of dread that interaction and the awkwardness that happens around it a lot of the time. But again, yeah, I mean, I'm still getting there, and so you know, I know that my science speaks for itself, and I know that I just need to, you just have to push through it. And I really do agree that you have to teach yourself to stop worrying about it, and it's something that I constantly actively have to do. And so that is a thing you have to deal with. But yeah, I think you can't let it hold you back. You just got to keep going and back yourself, because you're worth it. I think if you are passionate about it, you've been doing the work to the point where you can do this. So you just need to persevere, I think.
Can I follow up on that with a joke? In the days before the internet, we used to host seminar speakers, and they couldn't Google you. And so I would invite people to talk, and I would always put myself, you know, I would have to introduce them, but I would just show up in the room at the time they were supposed to give the talk, and I wouldn't schedule an appointment with the person before then. And it was always interesting to see the shock on their face, because, like Abigail, my name is Philip, so I mean, you know, there's no obvious anything associated with that name. So I just always used to get a kick out of people's reaction. Because, you know, I call them up on the phone. I'm from the West Indies, and so I don't have any accent that, well, they might have figured it out, but, you know, but most of the time they didn't, okay? And so there is an advantage we have that we can play these jokes on people, okay?
Yeah, I actually can add to that myself. My maiden name is McGee, so people, and my first name is Monika, so people were always confused. Are you Japanese? Are you Irish? You know, they had no clue. And then here I am.
Yeah. Actually, though, to be fair, like, I feel like at the end of the day, once you're now in that job, actually you then have, you know, the opportunity to, one, inspire. For example, if you're a professor, you then have the opportunity to inspire like other Black students that come through.
All right, absolutely.
They eventually will become PhDs. Or if you're in industry, you know, you then have the opportunity to almost like change that industry. So, for example, imagine you're in data journalism or data engineering or data science. You then have your experiences now to almost improve that industry and actually tell the story then, not just like, I don't know, not a whitewash story, I guess.
All right. Speaking about inspiring students, someone I recruited to Illinois in the PhD program, and I met him at an NSBP meeting, is Ibrahim Sisa. Do you know him? Any of you know him?
I know he's at Bucknell, right?
No.
Ibrahim
Sisa?
Is he an experimentalist?
Biophysicist?
Oh, I've met him before. I believe I know who you're talking about. You recruited him.
He you know, left Illinois with a PhD. He went to MIT, got tenure, went to Caltech as, you know, as a tenured professor, and then this year he accepted a job as the director of a Max Planck in Freiburg, and he also won a MacArthur this year. So, you know,
Name doesn't stop you.
Monika has a MacArthur as well.
So you know Ibrahim.
I haven't met him because there have not been any in-person events, but hopefully next year there'll be a big gathering or something, and I'll find him. I've heard the name though. Yeah.
Ibrahim is someone I brought up.
Okay, so I'm actually going to go ahead and try and shift it a little bit. We only have 7 minutes, and I don't want to keep anybody any longer than our scheduled time because people have things to do.
Right.
So I do want to bring it back a little bit to grad school because, you know, all of you are recent graduates in the last, I think, 5 years. something like that. No, okay, a little bit older, a little bit more than that. But so this might be a little more of a challenge. But you know, this panel was kind of geared towards current graduate students. You know, what is it going to be like once I graduate, when I get my PhD? So the question that I have for you is, you know, what about your graduate experience did you find most helpful for what you're actually doing now? What was the most useful parts of that? And then I'll also tag on this second question, which is, what is your most cherished memory from graduate school? So I'm going to see if we can try to get all of this in, you know, 5 minutes. So we'll do our best, okay? And I guess I can start with Naaza. Naaza has not gone first yet.
I guess it's all the student outreach that you have to do, all the science outreach and all the science communication, kind of inspiring people to, I guess, your cause in the first place. And what was the second question?
What was your most cherished memory from grad school?
I enjoyed the community of it, to be fair. I really enjoyed the community of it, just like speaking to people and just sharing ideas.
People, connections, relationship. Okay. All right, and next we can have Monika. Let's have Monika next.
So I think let's see. So the first question was what was most useful?
Yeah.
And I kind of touched on this before. I think that graduate school is just a time where you, at least certainly as an experimentalist, you develop problem-solving skills. Just every day you're solving a new problem, and you know that builds up over time. And so that's one aspect. And then the other aspect is I just feel I was fortunate. And perhaps this is my most cherished memory, is I was really fortunate to have a thesis advisor who just invested a lot of time just walking into the lab and telling us his latest crazy physics idea, and just talking to me and the other student I worked with about physics. And just sort of, I remember at the time we would sort of feel like it was a distraction, and you know, we had data to take, but just all those conversations, just day after day, just the amount of sort of just learning how to think like a physicist, with people who were just fun to talk to. That's kind of my memory of graduate school.
Awesome. Thank you. Philip, how about you?
It's a difficult question because I didn't pursue what I worked on in graduate school. I knew it was absolutely boring. So the memory I took most away was sort of realizing that I liked the unknown and it didn't scare me, and that I gravitated to that.
It sounds like you learned a bit of self-reflection in grad school. A little bit more about yourself.
Well, I mean, you always wonder if, as a theorist, you know, do you have it to, you know, to stare at a blank sheet of paper, knowing that what the problem is and come up with an answer? And I guess I realized I had that sort of, I didn't know, maybe you're right. Yeah, I didn't know I had that ability, and that sort of became apparent in grad school. And so that realization gave me the confidence to realize that, you know, this field that I'm in is not particularly interesting, but I'm going to go do something else. And I guess I've been doing that ever since.
Awesome. Thank you. Abby, what did you learn or take away most from grad school? Find useful.
So I think what I took away most from my graduate school experience was that I don't know, it kind of convinced me that I know the way to tackle these problems, but it allowed me to foster the confidence to do so in like a research environment. So I think it's very different, at least to the undergraduate way of learning, where it's a lot of exams and stuff. And so it was just very helpful for me to learn that, you know, the reason that I started doing PhD in the first place was, you know, there was something that I kind of proved to myself that I was able to do what I wanted to do, and I think that was really nice. And also, yeah, I think in terms of communicating my work to other people, it really, really helped me with that as well. And in terms of building my confidence to present my ideas and present my research and my work and my thoughts to other people, I think that was a skill that definitely very much improved during my PhD as well. In terms of like the fondest memory, it's gonna be really cheesy, but I think it was just like my friends that I made during my PhD and all this, like the fun times we had together. I think I came from quite a small apartment, so we had quite a close-knit group, and it just, they really, when I had like episodes of burnout or when I was struggling with a problem and it seemed like, I wasn't, it was just kind of really getting me down. Like, it was really kind of the time off with them that really helped me kind of balance it out and, take a break and kind of leave me feeling more like invigorated to kind of actually get to the end of that, I think it's important to, have that kind of make sure you have the off time that will enable you to be 100% when you actually are working and need to finish that problem. So yeah, I just good times with friends. It was really, really nice part of my PhD.
Totally, thank you. And then Clayton, if you could answer that as well, what experience did you take from grad school? What was your most cherished memory?
I'll start off with cherished memory. I think cherished memory for me is that I met my wife and I got married, so that was pretty good. And I met some decent people. But I think that's what it was. My wife was in graduate school, but not in physics, and so we met and got married. So I cherished that, and I met a lot of friends. I met a lot of people, that who are still close friends to this day. That during the graduate school process. And what I took mostly away from it was, I think it just, when I was leaving graduate school, I guess I don't know if this is positive or negative, but this is the truth. I felt like I wanted to prove to myself that a hunger, a desire, a drive to prove to myself that I can do something by myself, on my own. And so that was sort of what it was for me. It was like, okay, you did these things, you did some work, you did some good work, you did it with a really talented person. And, now can you do it yourself? And of course you do your postdoc and you want to do faculty, but that's kind of how I started up my postdoc, because I want to do this myself and see if, and I pretty much worked by myself when I was doing things until the end. But can I build these types of experiments myself? Can I kind of like Phillip and Monika said, can I kind of go off into the unknown and, where like I don't have, my advisor to run to and ask, if you get stuck, nobody's coming to save you, basically. Can you, do this? Can you do that? That was sort of the desire that I got. And then, I guess it was like trying to prove to myself that I can do those things. And, that's basically what it was. And that appetite is it's not quite, that appetite to doing it is not quite, taken care of, but that's what it left me with, honestly, too.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, thank everyone. I want to thank everyone for coming today. It is now 2:30. I know we started a little bit late, so we could go an extra 15 minutes, but I don't know if that's a good call or not. So I'm going to call it here. I wanted to thank everyone for coming. Your contributions were very insightful. I learned a lot. As a current grad student myself, I was really excited to talk to you all and to just get your experiences. And I really value the information that you shared. I also really need to give a shout out to Mr. Vidman Barber. He knows who he is. He's the one giving this amazing sign language translation right now. And it is awesome. I'm really impressed. So yeah, I absolutely want to applause for him. Thank you so much for doing that for us. Really appreciate it. And then also to the Black in Physics team, we've been working really hard to put this week together for everyone. So I hope that you can enjoy the rest of our events, sign up and participate in our competitions. And I hope that today's event was amazing and wonderful for you as it was for me. Thank you all, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you. See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.